to the 16th episode of Palmetto Politics. We took a little break to celebrate the resurrection of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ and spend a little time with family. So I hope you all enjoyed your time with family. I believe a lot of the schools were out last week for spring break. So, anyway, we're going to get started today. I am Shannon Grady, and that's my co host.
John Cummings, good morning.
And today we're going to have a special guest on. Former South Carolina Senator Lee Bright is going to be joining us in just a few moments to talk a little bit about what goes on in the Senate and help us to understand what possibly could be taking place now that the turnover has happened, the halfway point, whatever you want to call it, where any further bills that would leave the House have already done so. In fact, this week they are taking a break. The South Carolina House is not meeting this week, and I believe the deadline for anything to leave the House to go to the Senate is today. And since they're not actually meeting, there is no hope of anything leaving the House and going to the Senate. So if you had a bill that you were pursuing or following and hoping that it was going to make it over to the Senate for possible passage into onto the governor's desk for signage into law, unfortunately, that is unlikely to happen unless, again, it is presented from the Senate or there's some other methodology that they introduce that I'm not aware of. But at any rate, we're going to get started today because I tell you, we got a lot of interesting things happening all across our state, all across the country, really. And even though we really do focus on the Palmetto State happening at the national level that directly affects us here in South Carolina, legislation for things like, women only in sports. I think John, we talked about that earlier, correct?
We did, yeah.
Yeah. So, but anyway, I want to bring on former Senator Lee Bright. Mr. Bright is going to be with us on the phone. So we were having a little technical difficulty, but I think you'll be able to hear him just fine. Senator Bright, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great. How are you?
We are doing quite well. I wanted to have an opportunity to talk with you because I got a couple questions. I'm just going to go right out of the gate with my first question. Where you at? We need you back.
Well, I tell you, that was probably, I think the total spend against me in 2016 was about 800,000 is what the estimate is, and that was probably the best money the insiders ever spent because they raised the gas tax and they got other things through that I would not have allowed through when I was in the Senate. So it was a good investment on their side, but yeah, I do kind of miss it a little. It was a tough 8 years, but it was definitely worth it, and we were able to accomplish a lot. It's kind of funny. Your enemies say things, and if they've got enough money, it's kind of the old adage: if you put enough money behind a lie and you tell it enough, it becomes the truth. And I authored the largest audit of any state agency. It was an audit of the DOT, and it came out with all the problems out with a statement that everything's going well over there. So it's amazing how you just get overwhelmed. And of course, that was after Haley had switched sides and started playing for the other team. Of course, she was no help at that point, but we did get that audit through and showed a lot of problems over there with our DOT. And then, of course, we had the reformed the DEW. That was my bill as well. And it's just amazing that when they came after me, they said I never accomplished anything. And I mean, I could point to accomplishments. I could point just when they come out. $500,000 ought to be enough money for a state Senate campaign, but when you get the whole world after you, it's not enough.
Well, let me ask you this question: Who was your opponent that ultimately took the seat?
Scott Cawley had served 8 years in the state house, and the chamber really got behind him, and they had this thing called the Good Government Fund. And I don't know if you remember, I sponsored the bathroom bill, and we already had problems in South Carolina, which Haley denied, but we were already starting to have issues back then. With boys wanting to use the girl showers and things. So it was they ran this ad because I filibustered the gas tax. They ran the ad that while Lee Bright talked, 824 people. While Lee Bright talked about bathrooms, 824 people died on our highways. And they ran that on every radio station, regardless of genre, and it was just a nonstop ad. And basically, they tried to turn out, and they were successful in turning out non-Republicans in a Republican primary.
Well, John can speak to that.
Oh yeah.
He has a little bit to say about this open primary situation. So, John, share with Lee a little bit about what your thoughts are on the open primary.
Yeah, I mean, I always tell people that when I moved down here from New York, that was the thing that shocked me most was that in South Carolina, there was an open primary because even in New York, they know better than to have an open primary. And I think that's one of the biggest problems that we have here is that you don't get real Republicans in the general because they get knocked out by Democrats crossing over in the primary and voting for what I call the squishy Republicans. And then the rest of us have to hold our nose and vote for that Republican in the general.
Lee, were you able to hear that? I tried to put you under
absolutely, he's absolutely right. I mean, it makes no sense at all. Probably the reason the primaries have stayed open is the establishment is basically, the Lindsey Grahams of the world stay in office forever.
Yep.
Because we've got open primaries and they have so much money, and these, Drew McKissick has been our state party chairman
for too long,
and he sends these messages out that he's for closing the primaries, but he's done nothing. Zero, less than zero if we do the whole truth. I'm sure he's done nothing to help us on this.
Yep.
And he's got a bully pulpit. He's got the money to go after Jonathan Hill in a primary. He can actually go out and push for closing these primaries, but he hadn't done it. He's part of the political class, and we need grassroots people running the party, not the political class.
Absolutely, and that's that. I know that's one of the things that John and I absolutely believe in. That's why we got involved with the Horry County GOP. John came down from New York. He ran against, a little bit about John, I'm just going to brag on him a little bit. He ran against Ocasio-Cortez. He was the Republican primary winner, and he ran against her in a district that I believe was 8-1 Democrat, and he ended up losing. What was it, 2-1, John?
A little less than 2.5 to 1. Yeah.
Right. So he, he's had some of the scars, if you will, of a battle, and he came here, and the first thing he noted was, what in the world's going on with this open primary? And then secondly, what's going on with the fact that the elected chair, and that's all due to we did not have a person or leadership in the Horry County GOP that fit what Drew McKissick wanted. And that's happening across our state. So, of course, Drew was pushing, and I was a part of that. He was pushing another group, a shadow group, which was at that time I was the president of the Horry County Women's Republican Club. And so he was working through our club. I have since, had the epiphany and said, wow, this is wrong. And said, we can't be heard if you're just going to usurp their elected officials and say, well, we're going to go with somebody else. So Lee, one of the questions I want to ask you is, I was there, and what was it, a couple of years back when you ran against Lindsey Graham. I think it was you and Bill Connors and Nancy Mace. And
2014, believe it or not, that's been 9 years.
Yeah, I was there, and I thought, I was so hopeful that somebody would be able to take him out. But I will say this, I think one of the issues that we have anytime there is a movement to remove a politician, just like here when we removed Tom Rice, too many people get in the race.
Well, and I'll tell you that it's, since we have runoffs and it takes morality, to win the election, having a big primary field is a good thing. The problem we had in that race was Nancy Mace spent her money the end of the race attacking me. Graham, we probably could have had a runoff, but like I said, she kind of went on the assault with me, and that was basically, I think she spent all that money in Greenville and Spartanburg, and anytime you go negative and attack somebody, you suppress the turnout. So every voter that stayed home that would have voted for me is basically a vote for Graham. So. That was the problem in that race was anytime if you get one person that's going to attack the others, like that. I mean, of course, anytime you got a crowded field, you're all jockeying for supporters, but to go out on the assault like that 2 weeks before the primary was definitely not helpful for all the candidates opposing Graham.
Well, what we want to talk about now a little bit is we have, as I said before, the crossover period has expired today in terms of bills being able to cross over from the House to the Senate. And so when you were in the Senate, what was the typical action once that crossover period happened. If there were bills, for example, I know two bills right now. There's one that was supposed to put in stiffer penalties for individuals caught trafficking fentanyl, which is an extraordinarily dangerous poison. It took one of my family members. It's taken several of my friends' kids. And it has got to be addressed in a much different fashion than what we're doing with, say, cocaine or heroin or meth. Not that those aren't bad as well, but nothing compares to this fentanyl poison. And so that's a bill that did not make the crossover from the House to the Senate. And then we have another bill that also really does deal with children's safety. And that bill is the bill that is supposed to ensure that if parents are going to divorce, that the children still have equal access to both parents, so long as the parent is willing, able, and fit. And so that bill, even though it had 60 co-sponsors, both the majority leader and the minority leader supported this bill. You had one Republican on the committee, Democrat, Elizabeth Spencer Wetmore, stood up and objected. And of course, that killed it. And now it did not make the crossover. So those are just two bills that I know of that didn't make it over. So if you were a person counting on those bills to become law, what can be done?
I don't think, it's very slim. It's a 2-year session. So you've got, 2024. I would just make sure that you spent the, basically, while they're out, just pressuring those senators and those House members to get that over, because they can start on it, as soon as we get back, or as soon as they get back, rather. So, but the odds of something, if it was, something that they overwhelmingly wanted, they can make anything happen if they want to make it happen. But I just don't see them being able to get that done. But it's one of those things where if there's enough pressure. When I was in the Senate, we had, with super majorities, you can do just about anything.
Right.
And we have super majorities. But, if it was an incentive package for an electric car, I'm sure they'd come back in the summer for it. But,
right.
Saving people's lives is not as important as, as supporting the climate religion.
Well, John, do you have any questions you want to ask Lee in terms of what happens in the Senate or what he has for experience?
Well, I was really, you just brought up that idea of the climate religion, and I kind of wanted to, the Volkswagen deal, the Volkswagen Scout deal. I was wondering what the senator's position on all of that was. We know what ours is. We've discussed it many times about the government. What are your thoughts about that?
$400 million cash, $1.3 billion. I mean, it's here in the upstate, Christmas Eve, we lost our power because the grid was overwhelmed.
Right.
And they're telling people that are building subdivisions not to put the electric car charging in the garages because it will crash. The subdivision could lose power because it's such a drain on power. And it's just, it's total nonsense. It's the biggest, this climate change is the biggest scam ever perpetrated on the American people. And I say that, I mean, our government has done so many scams.
Right.
But this may be the biggest financial scam that they've ever perpetrated on us. I mean, even if you look at these incentives, the Green New Deal, I mean, it is just, and this bill has been South Carolina's own Green New Deal. And the fact we only had 4 senators vote against that is just mind-boggling. And the Freedom Caucus, we're going to have to protect those guys.
Yes.
They're going to come after them.
Yes.
Because they did point it out. I wish we had one senator that would have filibustered that bill, just one. I mean, that's probably the only reason I would ever consider going back, is because somebody needs to go down there. And maybe you can't stop this kind of stuff, but at least you can make it painful for them. It's too easy for them to rip us off.
Right. I know that's one of the things I said to John, is that we need a Freedom Caucus in the Senate because we don't have one.
And in Oregon.
Yeah, we don't have anybody in Ori that is a member.
I'll tell you, this is behind the scenes, and I had a House member tell me this. One of the House members stood up. This is when I was in the Senate,
right,
and made the comment that the last thing we needed, and this is right when Jonathan Hill was getting started, the last thing we needed in the Senate in the House was a Lee Bright.
Oh, jeez.
And I tell you, they have, and that was an open caucus.
Wow.
But they have got a bunch of fighters now. They're able to with Jonathan Hill, they isolated him and attacked him, and it's so hard for one House member, but he really did hold the line. But now, they've got, and they don't have all, and I've heard that a couple of them are leaving. They don't have a full, 17.
No.
But they've probably got a dozen that are really strong, and they have to be supported because they're going to try to beat them.
Right. And I'm hoping that in this next term, we're going to see that number increase. I know that I'm working and John is working and others working behind the scenes to try to track down other Freedom Caucus minded folks to run. We've got to get more conservatives to run for office and then get behind them and support them, because right now we have zero conservatives, period, from Ori. We have some moderates. We don't have any conservatives. We have people that profess to be. And then we also have just out and out Democrats. We have folks that are literally Democrats who are, have put an R behind their name for the sake of getting elected. Two examples that come to mind: in the House, we have the newly elected 64 representative Carla Schuessler, was a Democrat, helped volunteer for Hillary Clinton's campaign against Donald Trump in 2016. Not sure when she had the epiphany and decided that, oh, wow, actually I am a Republican. Don't believe it. And then we have, of course, the most famous of all. I know you know this gentleman, our state senator, Mr. Luke Rankin, who was, in fact, a Democrat all the way up to 2004 when he realized, I can't win as a Democrat. I'm going to have to cross over. But while he switched parties, he did not switch political ideologies.
Well, I'll tell you this. When I was in the Senate, I think at the time we had 28 senators. I'm trying to remember now the number of Republicans. And I think the number was 28. And we had 14 of those who had served as elected Democrats prior to being Republicans.
Absolutely. I know John we've talked about that to no end, that it's ridiculous that we don't have any kind of way to vet these people properly, because unfortunately in the primary, you know this, what is it, John? 1% of the people come out and vote in the primary, roughly, of the elected.
Yeah, the deck is always stacked in favor of the incumbent, and particularly when you have an open primary, it's obviously worse.
Yeah. So you have such a small percentage of people who come out and vote, and then of that percentage, I hate to say this, but a lot of them are just not informed. So if they go and vote, they just vote for the incumbent because it's a name they recognize. They don't bother to say, well, has this person done a good job? Have they lived up to what they professed they were going to do? Because if they bothered to check their background, they would very quickly see that, wow, they have not voted conservative at all. I mean, I think we did the CPAC and then another Freedom Index ranking of Luke Rankin, and he actually has a less conservative voting record than two Democratic members who are in the state house here in Ori. It's disgusting.
And the John Birch Society's gotten involved in state scorecards as well, which is something that, folks need to look at. And, they were really strong on the congressional races, but now they are getting down in the state levels. You can go to the JBS website and see how your state rep and senator has done.
Right.
I mean, it's one of those things when I was in the Senate, the club for growth, I think, like Nikki Haley, I tell you, if you want to talk about a backbreaker, people get so upset with Graham.
Yep.
But Nikki Haley was such a backbreaker because we were really gaining traction. The South Carolina Club for Growth was engaged. You had the Policy Council was really engaged, and we were really getting the word out. And then when she won that election for her second election, and she went native on us.
Yeah.
I mean, basically, we just lost all that type of support, and now it's really tough. And I'll tell you, we were talking about the primaries, and that's the number one issue. If we close the primaries, all the rest of the issues will be fixed.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is, I'll just give you an example. I was in Myrtle Beach after I lost my 2016 primary and was talking to a friend of mine, and he introduced me to a lady that was a school teacher. And it was a friend of his. And she was telling me, she said, I introduced myself. She said, I know who you are. I participated in the phone bank to oppose you. And I said, you did? And she said, yes. She said, I'm pro-choice, and I know you're a threat to our right to choose. And she said, the phone bank was out of Raleigh, North Carolina, and we had people all over the Southeast calling into your district, getting Planned Parenthood supporters to turn out and vote in your primary.
Yep. That
Planned
sounds
Parenthood
right.
controlling Republican primaries.
From another state. no less.
from another state.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, it's definitely a huge problem. I know this past summer when Roe v. Wade was overturned, I went with Savannah Craven. I don't know if you know who that is or not. She's a young lady here from ORE and very a rising superstar. But we went out and she wanted to interview people at a pro-choice rally that was held here in Myrtle Beach. And I got to be honest with you, I was heartbroken at how many people were there. And then if the numbers weren't enough, anyway, we're talking probably 500 people, but I really was hoping for 10. Uh, the thing that probably got me the most was the things they were saying. They were chanting things like, kill the kids, or actually they weren't saying kill the kids. They were saying F the kids, but they were saying the word, and just all kinds of vulgar. I won't even repeat it because it's not worth repeating, but that is the mentality of our youth and of the Planned Parenthood group.
well, I've got, and I'll tell you what now, this is, I'm going to get off point, but on point.
Right.
The problem is our churches.
Amen.
These churches have laid down, these preachers are too comfortable.
Yep.
They have allowed this stuff to happen. And some of these kids that are supporting this culture of death came out of these Southern Baptist youth groups. And that is disgusting that our preachers have just laid down. And now this transgender stuff, our preachers, they are, these Southern Baptists have gone, and I'm picking on the Southern Baptists because I am one.
Right. Me too.
And I don't know how much longer I'm going to be one, but I'm fighting to try to be an influence. But I was on the ERLC back when Russell Moore was there. He and I didn't get along. He's not there anymore. But bottom line is these churches have gotten so woke, and they are totally missing the culture that is and I can't even say on the verge of collapse. It is collapsing. So it's really a spiritual problem we have, and I wish these preachers would step up. They want to stay out of politics.
Yep.
Unless they're apologizing for slavery.
Yeah.
Which nobody alive today owned a slave in this country.
Nobody alive owned one or was one.
Or was one in this country.
Yep.
Maybe in other countries in the world today, but not here. But our preachers will talk about that, but they will not talk about murdering children, and they will not talk about the insanity that is this having to acknowledge someone else's mental illness that they've got, that they're a boy and they think they're a girl. I mean, it's just, it got me wound up this morning.
I'm gonna tell you, Lee, I'm a former college athlete. I played here at Coastal Carolina, and I also coached collegiately, both at a junior college and at a Division I school. And I coached softball and volleyball, and then I coached in high school as well, both sports. And there is absolutely no way under the sun I would have ever have tolerated either having a male on my team. I don't care how much lipstick, how many fake boobs, or how much hair you grow out. You are a man, and you are not going to be on my team, and you will not be in the locker room. And I would not have allowed it as a boy. I'm sorry, just would not have allowed it.
And every position, if this pendulum ever swings around, and if God decides He's going to allow us to continue, if it ever swings around, every position that mutilated a child needs to go to prison.
Amen.
Every single one of them.
Yep. And here's what's interesting. Because I did play college sports, I have a lot of friends who are homosexual. I've got homosexual family members. And so I've spoken to them and asked them, what is your position? What is your belief on transgender? Do you believe that it is a good thing for men to be able to transition to women through surgery? And to the letter, not one single one of them has said this is a good thing. They've all said, listen, this should not be happening unless they're at least 18, and it needs to be after counseling to make sure this is really what they want, because as you know, it's irreversible. You can't cut things off and then think you're going to add them back. And I said, to me, and I might be wrong about this, it seems like this is really a form of homophobia, because, when boys and girls were young and they had female tendencies, or they had, like I was a tomboy myself, somebody might have said, well, he may grow up to be gay, or she may grow up to be a lesbian or whatever. But now they're saying, oh, no. That means they want to be a man, or they want to be a woman. And so if they continue down that path, then there won't be any gay or lesbian people. There will only be transgenders, because they're going to start performing these surgeries at younger and younger ages. And I just see that being a can of worms that we will never get back in. It's not good.
Yeah, and I'm with you. You know, somebody gets over 18, but that's the other problem too. Is, I mean, adults can do what they want to do, but this thing with children and pushing them into it, and I've heard reports in some of these states where they're telling these parents, "Oh, if you don't let this child, you know, mutilate his body, then or let the doctor mutilate the child's body, then the child's eventually going to commit suicide." That is just absolutely beyond the. I just can't get over that. You really can't. It's you can't make all this stuff up. I
Absolutely.
mean, you read it and you think this can't be real, and it's real.
Yeah.
It's just.
I mean, well, John taught at an all boys school, so John, what was your? It was a Catholic school, is that correct, John?
Yeah, it was an all boys Catholic high school, and obviously you have issues with young men. You know, we have counselors and everything, and certainly that was not going to be suggested. You know, having any type of surgery. You talk to the parents. Being a high school teacher, is that you're going to notice these things, but you know what? Everybody got along, and there was no problems. My thing is with the parents. You know, I kind of liken it. Some people don't like this comparison. If you're a parent and you decide as a parent that you think it's okay for your 13-year-old child to have sex with adults, you'd be put in jail. You'd be
Absolutely.
put in jail. But it's okay to tell your child at 13, oh yeah, you can have corrective surgery and just completely change their life.
Yeah.
If you want to make that decision when you're over 18, and
Yeah.
it's a booming industry, unfortunately, there's billions of dollars in it for the medical community, which is another disgraceful issue that we can discuss at another time. But when you're looking at that type of situation where you have someone's life in the balance there, I think the fact that anybody can have surgery just with parental permission is outrageous. I think there should be bills across the board. If you're over 18, okay, you know, we really have no say over that. But for that surgery, I think it's a huge mistake.
And it's all about the money. I mean, I had no idea they were making this much money off these surgeries. And between that and the funding, you know, with BlackRock and all these other folks involved, I mean, it's always about the money. You know, you see the insanity, but there's money behind it, or it wouldn't have any traction.
Oh yeah,
Absolutely.
and I just, if I may, I wanted to go back to the spiritual part of this. As Shannon said, I'm a Catholic, and if you look at what's quote traditional Catholic churches, and we used to have Latin Mass, and the Pope put a stop to that. There are still some places that have it. There's one down in Charleston, the church that has it. But then we find out that the FBI is trying to infiltrate the traditional Catholic parishes because there's a fear there that they're traditional. That is it's a being attacked from all sides, and the government is in on it. I mean, that's the real spiritual battle. Is you have the government come terrorists, and then yet you have terrorist groups all over the place leading attacks on state houses in Tennessee, etc. And you're coming after traditional Catholics, so we're being attacked on all sides. It's an attack on Christianity.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw that today. I think I was watching Fox and Friends this morning, and they were showing that the federal government had basically said that, you know, just traditional Catholic churches were breeding terrorists. And I thought, wow. And it's simply because we object to the ideas that are being put forward by the left. The idea that, as we said, that a man can simply grow his hair out, put some fake boobs on, and declare himself a woman, and there it is so. It is not so. That is a mental illness. And as Megyn Kelly put it the other day, she said, until about 2 seconds ago, that was a diagnosed mental illness. And now suddenly we're supposed to just embrace it and accept it. And to what end? I think it is not going to be to our benefit. Well, Lee, before I let you go, I do want to ask you a question. I'd like to know, you know, I kind of jokingly start off with this, but, you know, you see yourself possibly coming back and running again in 24, or do you have something else in mind?
Well, I'm just trying, you know, we mentioned, you know, I've been praying a lot. I want to have an impact. whether it's on the outside or the inside. I've got a lot of people encouraging me to run for the state Senate. I've got a lot of people encouraging me to run for Congress again. My congressional race was it was a 13-way primary, and I won on the first ballot.
Right.
And then in the runoff, it was amazing. If you could look at those returns, Timmons is the one that beat me. He got like 87% of the vote in the inner cities.
Wow.
So they have beaten me with Democrats twice again. And here's the troubling part. You hit the nail on the head. I think it may be 10% of registered voters that turn out, not eligible, but of registered voters that turn out in primaries.
Right.
If these people that vote in these presidential elections every 4 years and think they've done their patriotic duty, if they will turn out in these primaries, it doesn't matter if the Democrats vote because we got them outnumbered.
Exactly.
But we have got to get these people to turn out, and that's something that I've just got to take that into account. Can we get the Republicans to show up for that one day? I remember when I lost in 2016, we had all these people that went to the beach and didn't vote absentee, and we noticed they didn't vote, and they were like, well, we didn't think you'd be beat. We can't take things for granted. We got to show. We got to turn out. We got to get neighbors to turn out. We've got to, like your podcast, we got to get the word out. Right now, we do not have a strong statewide organization that is holding these people accountable. So, in lieu of that, we've got to have folks like you that are going to be out there spreading the word in as many podcasts as we can do, as much as we do, just to keep the word out. If we can turn out, so I'm definitely considering it in 24. I'm just I'm doing a lot of praying because I really want to have an impact because I have grandchildren now.
Right.
And I'm just horrified of what we're leaving. I mean, I got involved in politics because of my kids.
Right.
And I wanted to make a difference and I wanted to try to save these babies. And I mean, I had all this stuff in my heart. And then here it is, I was elected to the school board. I was one of those people that got fired up about the school board. I was elected to the school board in 99. And so I spent 4 years in the school board, 8 years in the Senate. And it's gotten worse. And what can we do to stop it and turn it the other way? So that's what I'm focused on. And, if y'all will pray for me, I mean, that's
absolutely.
Prayer is important. And I just want to be used, and I just don't know where that is. But I'm going to have to decide pretty soon because 24 is coming on as fast.
Yes, sir. Well, folks, we're on with Lee Bright for those of you who are joining us. And we are hoping that we can get Mr. Bright back into representative somewhere, whether it's at the state, whether it's at the U.S. Congress. We need voices like yours. We need folks who are willing to stand up for what is right instead of standing up for the left. But I want to thank you so much. I know John's having some technical difficulty this morning, but I know we both appreciate your coming on.
I could hear him, so that was great. I could hear everything you said. So I'm glad that I was able to hear his questions and appreciate y'all having me on.
Absolutely. Thank you. And we'll be reaching out again to talk with you further in the future about whatever it is you decide to do. And I'll definitely be praying for you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. So, folks, that was former South Carolina Senator Lee Bright, and as he noted, he started out in I think he was a school board member, and so it doesn't matter what you do, whether it's city council, county council, school board member, as long as you are actively involved, that is what counts. We need more people to get involved. Right now, I would like to see every single delegate in the Ori delegation. I'd like to see them all primaried, every single one of them, because we can do better. I have to believe in my heart of hearts that there are some genuine conservatives out there, people that really understand what the Constitution means, really understands what it means to serve God, what it means to serve the people. I have to believe that those individuals exist, and for whatever reason, they have just not gotten involved to date. But I know John and I both want to see folks get elected who really and truly understand what it means to go and represent. I saw there was a video posted from the House, South Carolina House, that had Democrat Todd Rutherford stand up and argue with Representative Adam Morgan, the chairman of the Freedom Caucus, over this whole sending money to the green energy company, VW Scout. And his Rutherford's stance was, why are you listening to your constituents, Representative Morgan, do you think your constituents know better what's good for South Carolina than the Chamber of Commerce? And I wanted to go through the screen and say, "Are you kidding me? Of course. Absolutely. The constituents know better because it's our money that you're spending. It's our interest that are on the ballot when you do these things. So we absolutely not only have the right to make that decision, we have a vested interest in making that decision." But Democrat Todd Rutherford was no, he believed it was the chamber. The chamber should be the one that we listen to. And I was happy to see that Representative Morgan said, "You know what? I'm always going to listen to my constituents because the whole title of your job, Democratic Republican, is representative. You don't represent the chamber." Am I wrong, John?
No, and it's the picking winners and losers. And I think that for we conservatives, I think that this is the issue that candidates have to run on. The fact that they voted to take our tax money and give it to the seventh largest corporation in the world. That is a very woke corporation. Volkswagen is one of the most woke corporations there is. And that's bad enough. But the fact that you took $400 million cash and gave it to one company that's going to bring in people from Europe to work here, it's not going to create as many jobs as everybody thinks. And here's the other side. You have $400 million. If you found 8,000 small business owners in South Carolina and gave them $50,000 a piece, how many jobs do you think they create? A lot
Yeah,
more than Volkswagen's going to create. A lot more than Volkswagen's
absolutely.
going to create. And I'm not for that either. I don't think that
Right.
there should be
Right.
that money going towards private industry. But the government's job, as we've said many times on this show, is to set the table so people can succeed here business wise. And if you are in a position in a representative body where you still have to give people massive tax cuts and a blank check to come here, well, then guess what? You're not doing your job. That means that the table is not set for people to come in here and succeed. We need to set the table so everybody can come in and succeed, not to pick winners and losers.
Right. And folks, you may think, I thought what Lee said was important about our churches because I have seen too many lukewarm pastors who don't want to talk about anything political because they are afraid of losing their 501c status or whatever the case may be. Or, you know what? I'd be a lot more concerned about losing your salvation. And I am one of those people that believes once saved, always saved. However, there are people sitting in your congregation who are not saved. And I'd be a lot more concerned about them going to hell because you refuse to speak out against things like transgenderism and this, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and this environmental social governance, which is just Marxism, communism. Then I would be concerned about losing some tax break that you get if you remain neutral in politics. And in fact, I would even say you can speak on these issues and remain neutral because today I was looking at a friend had posted on Facebook that there have been in the last week and a half, 3 Democrats from various state legislatures have left the Democratic Party and gone over to the Republican Party. Now, on the one hand, you think, well, that's great because what they did in at least 2 of those states, I think Louisiana and North Carolina, when they made that transition, they gave the Republican Party the vote they needed to become a quote unquote supermajority. But what I will say is that that is not a thing to celebrate because what they really did is they just took their political ideology and put it into the Republican Party. It's not like, I'll say it again, it's not like they had some epiphany and said, wow, everything I've believed until this point in time about how governance should take place is wrong. And we actually should perform conservative positions and think. No, they didn't change their political beliefs are the same. They just changed the letter after their name from D to R. And so what they're actually doing is watering down the Republican Party. The grand old party is becoming a party of grumpy old people. And I'm done with that nonsense. I am not going to celebrate when somebody leaves the Democratic Party and comes to the Republican Party unless they come to me and say, I no longer believe in the Marxist agenda. I no longer believe in giving handouts to everybody. I mean, it's fine to give a hand up, but handouts, that's done. The adage that we create a safety net, yes, not a hammock. Um, And we have got to start really looking at these folks who say, "Oh, I'm a Republican." No, you're not. Your voting record says otherwise. And if we don't put a stop to this crossing over from the Democrat side to the Republican side simply because it's more advantageous for you when it comes time to be elected, we are never going to be able to distinguish the difference between a Republican Party and a Democratic Party, which leads us to what party do we call it now, John?
Well, I'm, you know me, I'm the uniparty,
The
but the
Uniparty.
squishy Republican
Yeah,
Party. Yeah, the
it's
squishy Republicans.
yeah, it's a uniparty. So there really is no distinguishing factors between the Republican Party and the Democrat Party, with the exception of a few individual members. Like here in South Carolina, as well as at the U.S. Congress, you have groups like the Freedom Caucus. When I was in York County, South Carolina, at the time, Mick Mulvaney was my representative. And I think everybody knows that guy because he went on to be first the CBO, and then he was Trump's chief of staff. And Mick was a great guy, a true conservative, and he was a member of the Congressional Conservative Caucus. And I was able to interview him while I was stationed in Belgium with my husband. I wasn't stationed, I was there with my husband, who was stationed in Belgium at NATO. And I asked him, I said, Mick, why is it that we can't get a conservative speaker? Why do we always have these, as you call them, John, squishy Republicans? And he said, well, Shannon, out of 435 members of Congress, we have 100 members in the conservative caucus. And he said, I would say of those 100 members, probably less than 50 are actually conservative. So when you've got 50 conservatives against 385, wow.
Yeah, and to get back to the priests and whoever, I think it's incumbent upon the people in the congregation to start questioning these pastors. I don't mean to, don't get in there to speak about these things. These are the things that plague society. We're all familiar with the Bible. Most of us are pretty well read when it comes to that, and we hear the message. But why aren't you speaking about these things publicly? These are the things we are being attacked from all sides. Christianity is under attack. There's no doubt about that. It's all part of the spiritual battle here. The fact that pastors and preachers will not speak about this, they need to be put on the spot for that, because that's what's threatening their very existence.
Yes, absolutely.
We need to question. We do have a role. We do have a role. It's not just on the pastors. Yeah. I mean, Senator Bright, who's right. But we need to question these pastors and say, hey, look, you need to speak about this, or you know what, we might very well go somewhere else.
Well, that's why I left the church I was at. I love Pastor Barfield and I loved his wife, but I did not love his position or his thought processes on politics, where he just thinks everybody's, it's not, there's no good or bad in politics, and it's all bad, which to some degree is true. But if you're not going to speak out against the evil that is being presented, whether it be from a Republican or whether it be from a Democrat, then I can't sit under your leadership anymore. I need somebody who's going to call a spade a spade. And you're absolutely right. We need to be going to pastors and saying, why are you not talking about this transgender nonsense that's going on? Why did so many of our churches shut down during the COVID pandemic? Are you kidding me? I mean, I wonder, John, when the plague was ravishing Europe, do you think the church is closed? I'm going to go with no, because that's where people went to get help.
Yeah.
Were the churches. So the idea that we can simply, live in this little bubble of Christianity and not have to deal with anything happening in society is, I believe, what's gotten us to this point now. What did they call us in the 80s? They called the silent majority, that Christians just weren't speaking up, and then they were awakened, and Newt Gingrich did his contract with America, and there was this big, I don't know what you call it, wave of conservatism that came back. But we got to quit. We can't keep having these waves. I mean, it's got to be a sustained flow. We got to have a waterfall of conservatism. It can't just be a trickle that comes on and then it turns off and then it comes back on again. You have to remain vigilant. I believe the Bible says that we have to remain ready at any hour, because he could return at any hour. And as I look across the spectrum of people leading in churches, as you noted, I do not see enough people standing up and saying, if you want to attend here, I'm going to preach that a man is a man and a woman is a woman, and that abortion is wrong, sex outside of marriage is wrong, and that you need to start living the life that Christ laid out for us to live. Now, by no means do I want anybody to think that I'm saying that I'm perfect, because good gracious, these books behind me, if I were to write down all the things that are wrong with me, this wouldn't even be enough. I need more space. But I don't live in outright sin. And what I mean by that is I don't sin and say, well, it's not really a sin. I mean, I'm gay, but it ain't really a sin. Or I'm having sex outside of marriage and it's not really a sin. Or I'm doing drugs and destroying my body, but it's not really a sin, like people do. I mean, I've had people tell me, I'm not going to say the name, but I had someone in my family, not married, got pregnant, had the first child, and we all said, okay, we're going to help you out. We're going to make sure that things go good. She got into a church. We were so excited. She told me, oh, I love the Lord, and great, fantastic, awesome. She got pregnant again by a different man. So we all said, what are you doing here? You got to make better decisions, precautions, so that you don't end up in this position. And her thing was, well, I don't believe in having a kind of what was she protection. She said, because I think that's a sin. Now, she's now had 3 children by 3 different men, still not married. Well, she just got married. And I just thought to myself, but that's the mentality of our youth, is that there's certain things that we don't do because it's a sin, but having sex outside of marriage and being a fornicator, that's perfectly fine. It does not matter whatsoever. But I can't use any kind of birth control, like, I don't know, abstinence. So, but that's the mentality. And one of the things
And
I
I
said at
guess
my church, go ahead, John.
I guess the very is the left, the progressives, whatever you want to call them, they are extremely well organized. They have infiltrated.
They've infiltrated. Yeah, we lost you there. You cut out on us, John. Yeah, I think what John was saying is they've infiltrated not just the political arena, but they've infiltrated the churches, and that's why we're seeing things like women being uh, ordained into the priesthood, and we're seeing all number of and manner of things happening within the churches that would go against completely what the Lord said should be happening. Oh, go ahead, John. You were saying you cut out on us there.
Yeah, sorry, I dropped out there. I'm just saying, I think the buried lead is the fact that we Republicans have been put in a position where we have to fight each other, because the traditional part of the party, or the establishment part of the party, rather, is so intent on maintaining their power, they'll do it by any means necessary. And so we spend left, the progressives are extremely well organized, and they have infiltrated every institution in this country. And until this establishment part of the Republican Party wakes up, we're going to continue to battle, and we're going to have to steamroll them. And that's my opinion. We're going to have to steamroll them to save this country, because they are too busy scheming and conniving and doing whatever they can to hold on to the power that they have, instead of focusing on problems at hand. And the problems at hand are, we're going to lose this country.
Yeah. I put a post up the other day, and I'm going to share what I said in that post with our viewers, because I think it's important that people understand just exactly what we're dealing with. I said, if you want to start meeting with like-minded individuals to make plans for what you can do, because I'm telling you right now, I've been watching things on a national level. If you're not paying attention to the BRICS, which is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, you have really need to start paying attention, because the US dollar is about to become worthless. And when that happens, everything you own is going to change in its value. And they're now saying that by 2030, I think I heard recently, that they're gonna create this lifestyle in America where you don't own anything, the government owns it all, and you're gonna be happy about it. Well, I ain't gonna be happy about it, but I'm certainly not gonna be happy about not having a. Go watch Glenn Beck, watch Tucker Carlson. He talked about it last night, about the French prime minister saying that he believed that it was time for us to get rid of currency and have this digital format instead. It just boggles the mind. But folks, in order to start working together to get these kind of things taken care of, you are absolutely positively going to have to start talking with other like-minded individuals. And so what I said was that here's what you need to do. You need to pick out just a few people. I mean, like 3, 4, 5 people that you really know, and you've known them for 3 to 5 years. You know where they live, you know where they work, you know them, you know their kids, all of that. And you say, hey, meet me at, for example, here in our area, everybody would know where the boathouse was or is, because that's a very common location here. So we say, hey, meet me at the boathouse. Leave your cell phones at home. Don't bring them. Do not bring your cell phone. That is a tracking device now. That is not something you need. They will track you with it. Leave your cell phone at home. Show up to that restaurant where everybody knows how to get there. And then once you get to that restaurant, then whoever is in charge is going to say, now we're going somewhere else. Okay. So now you're going to pick another location. You're going to go meet there. And if possible, limit the number of vehicles, take one car, drive to that location, have your discussion, and then say, okay, we're going to meet again at a different location on a different day at a different time. And you're going to have to vary that. And the only way you add people to that group is if I gave the 5-year. And the reason I did 5 years is because in order for the FBI to be undercover for 3 to 4 years, it has to be something substantial. It means they might go undercover and say a Proud Boys organization or an Oath Keeper organization or something like that, because they see there's a value in spending that kind of time in a group like that. But you and I just start getting together for the first time, they're not going to commit an FBI agent to us getting together. So that's why I think it's so important that you have people getting involved by doing those things. So you want to have folks that you trust. And so I say 5 years. If you've known them for 5 years or longer, they're probably good to go. You don't know them for 5 years. You don't know where they live. You don't know what they do. I wouldn't let them in, because there's a good chance that they could be one of those plants. They could be an FBI plant. And that's the way we got to start thinking. We've got to start thinking, how are we going to meet? How are we going to discuss things? Because if everything goes the way it looks like it's going, we're going to have to work together with food, with growing things. And John, I don't even know, did you hear yesterday that they are now going to start putting the vaccine into vegetables? They're going to start growing plants with this mRNA DNA in it, and then they're going to feed it to the animals as well. So if you and I didn't take the vax. So now if we eat certain vegetables or meats from the grocery store, we may be getting this vaccine whether we want it or not.
It's going to be a huge boon for farmers markets, out that much, because a lot of people are just going to stay away from it. I know I am. If I have to go natural, it's just the way it is. That's the point about, being surveilled, if you will. The fact, all you have to know, keep going back to the Catholic Church, the fact that they infiltrated that have Latin Mass tells you all you need to know. These are, believe me, these are people that are good family people. They still believe in the original traditional Catholic values of having, big families and strong families and strong religious beliefs. And the fact that they think that that is a problem tells you all you need to know about the FBI. The fact that I'm in a position, and we're all in a position, for 21 years. I was in law enforcement for 8.5 years. And now law enforcement enforcing unjust laws at every level. I would ask any of my friends and neighbors who are in law enforcement all over the country, you cannot, in good conscience, enforce unjust. And if they're asking you to do so, you need to rethink that. If they're putting you in that position, you need to get together as a group and challenge it. If you have a union, which we have in the perspective, if that doesn't work, you challenge it from an perspective. You are not given that right to enforce unjust laws. I mean, I could talk about this forever. That's what was behind the entire defund the police movement, was they wanted to get a police force that would be willing to enforce unjust laws. And the only way you can do that, especially in large cities, to take the community policing out of the equation. In New York, the entire police department is based upon community outreach, and it has to. And we had skin in the game. We had, relatives in precincts. You couldn't live in the same precinct that you worked, but you lived in neighboring precincts. You grew up there. You had a lot of friends there. You had cousins there. Whatever you had, you're not going to enforce unjust laws on people that you know. And the whole defund the police movement was this movement towards a national police force. And you see it now.
Yeah.
It's not local policing, and they're asking police officers to enforce just laws. And I ask every officer across the country, if you're in that position, you have to stand up. You took an oath
Absolutely.
that you're not supposed to be enforcing unjust laws.
Absolutely, and I know that I've seen several. We've seen some sheriffs out of Texas, for example. We've seen the sheriffs out of Florida have stood up and said on multiple occasions that they weren't going to enforce any sort of federal laws that were unconstitutional or state laws that were unconstitutional. So there are men and women out there that are saying we're not
Absolutely.
going to push through, and that's a good thing. But you're absolutely right, and in the same way, we need them to stand up as law enforcement agencies. We need the leaders in the churches, not just the pastors, but the elders, the deacons. We need those folks to stand up and say, we are not going to stand idly by and watch our church, our faith, our people being destroyed from within. And if we don't, I hate to say it, sounds so, such a cliche, but if we don't stand up now, we're going to fall for anything, and we're going to spend our time on our knees, subjected to a tyrannical government, which we really already have that now. We have an oligarch system now. We're not a constitutional republic anymore, as far as I'm concerned. We have an oligarchy that they've established. The various uh, NGOs as well as bureaucrats, really, they have way more authority than they were ever supposed to have. And if you look at the Constitution, some of the powers that have been granted to people like the EPA or organizations like the EPA, and so allowance for that, there is none. Absolutely is none. So we have got to start pushing back and pushing back hard. And that begins with making sure that you tell people, that you spread. If you find out something, you read something, you hear something, you see something like this, share this. Talk to people, have the conversations. It may be uncomfortable, but we're going to get more uncomfortable if you don't speak out now. And I can almost imagine that pastors are going to be saying this one word that kills me: I don't want to offend anybody. Really? Because Christ was pretty offensive. If you think about it, he was pretty offensive because he just said, hey, this is right and wrong. And if you are the wrong, you're in the wrong. I'm going to go out on a limb and say the woman at the well did not think that conversation started off with not being offended. This is true. You had many men, and they weren't your husbands either. Now, in this day and age, that's pretty offensive. So the idea that we can't offend someone is really not helping them. What you're doing is, in an effort to be tolerant, you are going to tolerate them right into the hell, right into hell. So we've got to start pushing back against this agenda. And I don't want my son to have to live in a world that is not free. I don't want my son to grow up in a time where I was listening to Glenn Beck talk about this, and I've seen this myself because my grandparents went through the Great Depression, and I remember, grandmother had the big ball of aluminum foil because she didn't want to, at any time that it could happen again, they would not be able to get it. And he talked about opening Christmas presents. You had to do it very carefully because the wrapping paper was going to be reused again. I don't want my son to have to live in that kind of world, but I'm afraid it's coming, and it's coming quickly. So, John, I'll let you have the last words, and then we'll call it a day and wrap this one up. And I thank you folks for listening. And please, again, message us, comment in the comment sections. Let's have a dialogue. Let's talk about what's going on in the world. Can you hear me, John?
Yeah.
Go ahead. You can have the last word.
No, it's incredible that in this very short time, since Joe Biden took over and his regime took over, that we have dropped on stage. Everybody is pointing at us and laughing. And that's not the only part of the story that needs to be told. The part of the story that needs to be told is just what you talked about. Our economy is on the brink of collapse, a complete collapse. And the complicit media is telling you none of this. They're telling you that the economy is good, that job numbers are good. It's not. This is very close. I hear Steve Bannon all the time say, what we're in right now is 1938 on every level, economically, politically, on the world stage. And the faster that people realize this, and you're not going to find it from the media, you got to find it yourself. And I've said this for many years. The biggest threat to this nation is a complicit media. We're dealing with that for quite some time now. They do not report the news. And that's across the board. There are very few places where you can get straight news. That includes Fox News. You know, that
Yep.
all of it is. You know what? I hate to draw this comparison, but it's very similar to the preacher. They don't want to lose the money.
Yes.
They don't want to lose their regular viewers, and just like they don't want to lose religious part group you're part. That's what the bottom line is for these people, and that's sad. It's sad on every level, and it's ruining the country.
Yeah, I guess those squishy Republicans are squishy Christians too.
Yep.
Well, folks, that's gonna do it for us, and we hope you enjoyed this episode. And we will be back on Thursday. But for today, send you off with God bless, Godspeed, and we will see you folks next time.